Okay, so we talked about some of the features or characteristics of neural networks, and now we're going to talk about some of the criticisms of neural networks. So we've been talking about connectionism, about how connectionism is using the brain to constrain our theorizing about how the mind works. And the assumption is that these models actually mimic very well how the brain works. However, that's not quite true. For example, neurons are not as homogeneous as nodes or units in a neural network. That just means that neurons aren't the same. They're not all the same. They vary a lot in their functionality. Whereas the nodes in a neural network are all basically the same, right? So the units in a neural network, these nodes are very homogeneous in that they can be interchanged. One node in one layer can be a node in another layer. It's the connections that really matters, right? And the nodes just fire or don't fire. But in general, actual neurons are much more complex than that. There's tons of different receptors and different types of neurotransmitters. And I don't think we really understand how complicated or complex neurons really are. They don't just fire or not fire. I mean, they do just fire or not fire, but there's more to it than that. And the other thing is that brains don't work as parallel as neural networks do. So in neural networks, a layer can be activated, but other nodes and other layers can also be activated at the same time or in parallel. And brains aren't quite as parallel as neural networks. They're still parallel. They still work pretty in a pretty parallel fashion, as we can see by the fact that different neurons can fire at the same time, but they're not quite as parallel, right? There's also, and the other thing is that there's also no evidence or clear mechanism for backpropagation in the brain, which is kind of a big deal because backpropagation is sort of the name of the game. Without backpropagation, there'd be no learning. So it's not clear what brain mechanism would take care of backpropagation. There's also no air signal, at least not in the way that neural networks dictate. Yeah. And the last thing is that some have criticized neural networks as being overly flexible. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to talk about it in more detail in the next video, but I think I'll just say that if a model explains data really, really well, sometimes that means it's overly flexible. And and even though it's fitting the data really well, that doesn't mean that it will predict new data very well, which is a problem. So it's sort of like flexibly fitting onto the data, right? A flexible model is flexibly fitting to the data. And so that's an issue. And this is also just as an aside, this is also a problem with all kinds of machine learning or complex statistical models. And so it's just an issue, right? And there's ways of mitigating overfitting, which is what we'll talk about more in the next video.